Pull out your hose and grab your can. We're about to integrate another Pest Geek podcast. Hi, everybody. Frank Hernandez here, and welcome to the Pest Geek podcast, bringing you the latest information on pests, products, and politics from today's leading industry sources to help you start, manage, and grow your pest control business.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome back to another edition of the Pest Geek podcast. I am Frank Hernandez, your Pest Geek, here discussing all things pest. We want to remind our audience to join in on the revolution. That's right, join in on the conversation, be part of the society. Pest Geek Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook. And we're on YouTube. We're on the web, pestgeekpodcast.com. Check out there the notes, everything that we put into the podcast. They're all on there. And here is Stephen Van Tassel with today's topic.
Thanks, Frank. Stephen Van Tassel here, wildlife control consultant, bringing you another episode of The Wildlife. Wanted to talk today about a particular rodenticide. It's not going to be very well known to most of you, because especially if you're dealing with pest control, because this particular pesticide is only allowed now for use in below ground applications for the specific target pest of pocket gophers. So the product I'm talking about here is strychnine. Yeah, strychnine's still around, and it's only allowed in the United States for use on pocket gophers in a below ground application. So, but let's talk a little about strychnine, because strychnine is one of the non-anticoagulant rodenticides. There are others out there that are not anticoagulant, like bromethylene, zinc phosphide. Those are active ingredients that are also non-anticoagulant. So there is more to the world than anticoagulants, although certainly for our industry, anticoagulants are going to be the most common rodenticide category that's going to be used to control pest rodents. So I wanted to just talk a little about strychnine because, well, this is the Pest Geek podcast, and we want to be geeky, and we want to learn about things that they're sometimes outside of our regular everyday activity. And it's not outside of my world because I'm a vertebrate pest specialist. But anyways, I thought it might be interesting because there's a number of people that get injured by strychnine every year, at least between in the 1980s and 90s. And a third of those individuals were actually deliberate consumptions, believe it or not. So people trying to harm themselves, which is quite sad. So it just brings to the forefront the importance of making sure that your pesticides are secure, because people sometimes want to do bad things with them, sometimes to themselves, sometimes to other people. So make sure you know where your pesticides are and that they're secure. And so let's talk a little bit about strychnine today. Well, as I mentioned, it's a non-anticoagulant, so that it doesn't cause bleeding in the animal. In fact, it's a powerful convulsant, which is just sort of a fancy word meaning that it causes the individual or animal that consumes it to twitch violently. So their muscles, they lose control of their muscle activity, and they begin to, it's like they're having a seizure, and they're seizing violently, and that sort of activity is interrupting their ability to breathe. I think it can interrupt their ability to their heart activity. And so you have this, their muscles firing all over the place because it's actually disrupting the normal process of how your nerves are communicating in your body at the chemical level. And so you basically can like asphyxiate because you're not able to breathe properly and you're consuming all of this energy. And so it's a pretty ugly way to die. I believe I remember a picture where an individual that consumes strychnine, their muscles you have the muscles that actually can pull like your bicep and then your tricep. So what happens is their extending muscles actually froze, and so they were actually arched. Their body was arched on the ground from the head to the toe. The rest of their body was not touching the ground because of they just went into an extension process. So it can be kind of an ugly way to die. Strychnine has been around for a very long time. It was certainly used as far back as 1640 to kill birds, cats, and dogs in Europe. And what they used were the seeds of a plant where strychnine comes from. And the name of the plant is Strychnos nux vomica, which is kind of an interesting name. Strychnos, of course, is where we get the word strychnine from. Nux, I believe, means the night, and then vomica must cause some severe nausea. So Strychnos nux vomica is the tree, and the seeds contain the active ingredient that we call strychnine. Now, this tree is not found in the United States or in North America. It's actually found in India, Northern Australia, Sri Lanka, and Vietnam. And so this is why sometimes it's very difficult to get strychnine, because if there's been a problem with the crop in those countries, or if there's a labor stoppage, or there could be transportation issues. So we may have difficulty getting strychnine because of those. We can't source it from here in America. Now, I was told there was one company that was actually looking to import some of the plant and grow it in either the southern U.S. or perhaps Mexico, but it just didn't prove to be economically viable to do that, so that didn't go through, because you don't need a lot of strychnine to get the job done. And we'll talk about some of the LD50s here shortly. As I said before, it's only allowed presently for use on pocket gophers in a below ground setting. Now, what happens is sometimes people will say, well, I'm using it below ground, but it's for ground squirrels. No. It has to be both things have to obtain. It has to be in a below ground application. That means no access to that product. You can't leave the hole open, so you have to close the hole. It has to be only for pocket gophers. So if there are no pocket gophers around, you can't use the product. So it's very restricted. That all occurred in 1988 with an EPA decision to stop allowing above ground use or burrow use that was not closed off use. And the reason was because of its concern for probably primary and, of course, secondary poisoning, because there is a secondary poisoning component to this particular product. However, the product has been used, the active ingredient has been used to kill other animals besides pocket gophers. This was prior to 1988. It's still available. I guess you could probably get a special permit if things got really, really bad, because here in Montana, prior to 1988, it was actually used, strychnine was actually injected into eggs, and those eggs were distributed out in the landscape to kill rabid skunks. There was a rabies epidemic here among skunks, and so they wanted to sort of knock that population down. Out here in Montana, in the Great Plains areas, we have what's called terrestrial rabies, and our primary animal that carries terrestrial rabies is skunk, where back in the east, the primary carrier of terrestrial rabies is actually raccoons, and then you have spillover into skunks, but that's primarily a raccoon-based rabies. And of course, bats can have rabies as a general rule in terms of a small part of their population. You want to maybe refer back to the podcast I did on rabies earlier. So how does it kill? I mentioned before, it interrupts the nervous system of the organism that consumes it. It causes massive twitching. I've spoken to farmers that have used strychnine on ground squirrels, and they just say when they eat it, they just come back and you see them twitching. The animals are twitching because it causes these powerful muscle contractions in the animal. And so by disrupting those neurotransmitters, the animal is not able to maintain proper homeostasis. That means a normal life. And so therefore it dies. It's highly toxic. It's an extraordinarily toxic product. Let's go over the LD50, just to refresh your memory out there, or perhaps for new visitors to our podcast. LD50 is lethal dose 50%, which means that they find out how much is needed on a milligram per kilogram basis to kill half of the test population. So if you have 20 rats, how much product do you need on a milligram per kilogram? So it's a ratio to kill 10 of those rats. So not all of the rats, just 10. So we're trying to find out how much is necessary. And so the research has found that it takes 6.4 milligrams per kilogram to kill a male rat and 2.2 milligrams per kilogram to kill a female rat, and death takes place in less than 1 hour after exposure. Now remember, LD50s are always acute doses. These are not chronic doses. So this is how much does it take in one shot to kill that particular rat. Now, a rat doesn't weigh anywhere near 2.2 pounds, as you well know. A kilogram is 2.2 pounds. A rat rarely reaches even a pound, which would be 16 ounces. So when we say 6.4 milligrams per kilogram, well, that would be 6.4 milligrams for probably 2.2 rats, right? So very large rats. So it's going to take a lot less to kill an individual rat, because it's much less than a kilogram, to be sure. So it's highly toxic. It's also toxic to other small mammals at very small ratios. And it will also kill birds and other organisms. It can kill fish depending on concentrations. But birds, believe it or not, require a lot more to kill them, but it will kill them, particularly if they're able to get the treated product directly. There is some concern for secondary poisoning because animals that consume strychnine, some of that product will remain in their muscle tissue. It's not like zinc phosphide where it sort of gases off. Or if they find the strychnine product inside their gastrointestinal tract, then that is also going to be very concentrated. Let me give you some numbers here. When they were doing a study on pocket gophers with strychnine, they found that it reached a 5.4 parts per million in the muscle tissue of the pocket gopher. So obviously it's still remaining even after the pocket gopher is dead. But when they tested the gastrointestinal tract, that's sort of like the stomach and the intestines, they found 35.8 parts per million. So it's a significantly, almost 6 to 7 times more strychnine in the gastrointestinal tract, that means the stomach and the intestines, when they were analyzing it. So if one of those pocket gophers reaches the surface of the ground, there is a small risk that it can poison another creature. And if there's a couple, then certainly that risk increases. What about the danger to humans on this? Well, it doesn't really seem to have any type of safety problem on the dermal side. So you're not going to be poisoned through your skin by handling it per se, but it can be absorbed through the eyes. And certainly when you swallow it, of course, you're going to be wearing gloves anyways, because you don't want to have that possibility to kill you. What the researchers believe, and they're estimating here, because obviously we don't want to be testing on people, but they believe that one swallow of an active ingredient bait, and by the way, the AI on the bait is only 0.5% AI, active ingredients. So think about that for a moment. 5/1000th of the product of whatever that 1 ounce bait is, 5/1000th of it, AI of strychnine of that 1 ounce product can kill a 22-pound child. One swallow of that. That's amazing. So you can kind of give you a feel for just how toxic this product is. And this is why you want to be careful. But believe it or not, you can obtain this strychnine over the counter. In my state of Montana, it's a general use pesticide, particularly at the pound level. If you're going into burrow builders, actually some of the burrow builder is a mechanical device that allows you to apply toxic baits for pocket gophers over large acreage areas. And strychnine is one of those active ingredients that can be used in a burrow builder. You can still buy some of those 35, 50-pound bags as a general use product, believe it or not. So it can be available. So why do I mention that? Because again, I want to emphasize the importance of keeping your product under lock and key, particularly when you're using some of these higher toxic products. You should be doing it regardless. But obviously, there's a greater concern for something like strychnine and zinc phosphide, some of these highly acute toxicants. It does not take much, and someone who has ill will can do some very bad things, either to himself or others. Let me give you a little bit of other information. Strychnine is incredibly toxic on dogs and cats. We've had situations, I'm aware of situations where people have poisoned horses, people have poisoned dogs, and what they would do is they would take some of this product, they would put it into meat and throw it out for the dogs, and that dog's a goner when he eats that. It does not take much at all to do this. So it is imperative to be sure that you use this product correctly and accurately, and understand that if you have people complaining about, my dog got sick, you may not, they may be looking at you because you're the pest control operator, and they may be thinking that you poisoned their dog, but you have to keep in mind that you may not be the guilty one. Some of these free-ranging dogs can travel quite far. Even in urban areas, they can travel over several houses. You don't know what that dog has been into. And there could have been someone who grabbed some of this product and all of a sudden is poisoning a dog, or maybe they were trying to poison something else and the dog ate some bait, or a horse ate some bait. It does not take much at all. So follow the label, keep things safe. But I hope you found that information a little bit enlightening, even if you're never going to be dealing with pocket gophers. Strychnine is a product that's only allowed for pocket gophers. And you may say, well, why do we still have it then if it's only for one animal? Well, the reason is strychnine, the research shows, of the toxic baits that are available, it's demonstrated to be the most effective. Not by much, but it has always proven to be more effective than any other product, but by a couple of percentage points, not a lot. It is more expensive than other products because it has to be imported into the United States from overseas. However, if time is an issue and you don't have time to keep rebating for pocket gophers and you're dealing over smaller acreages, it may be worth the extra product cost when compared to zinc phosphide or some of the anticoagulant baits. I hope you found that at least interesting, if not helpful for your business. Be safe out there. Again, I'm Stephen Van Tassel, wildlife control consultant, giving you information about the wildlife. Back to you, Frank.
We hope you have enjoyed this edition of the Pest Geek Podcast. Until next time, have a pestacular day.
Thank you for listening to the Pest Geek Podcast. If you have enjoyed the Pest Geek Podcast, please give us a rating, write a review, or subscribe to the channel. You can join the Pest Geek Society by visiting pestgeekpodcast.com. Thank you for listening. See you next time.